Hello everyone. The salmon season's open here in Western Washington, and I've been enjoying this book by our local author Richard Stoll, who actually used to run a fly shop right here in Poulsbo. One of the main themes in the book is that we should be designing our flies to take into account how salmon see shapes and colours in their underwater world, rather than the way we see them in our world above water. And he talks about the characteristics of salmon vision and how different colours are perceived by the fish in different depths of water. Now tomorrow, the tide and wind conditions are going to be just right for a coho fishing session on the beach. So today I've been tying up one of the patterns he's designed in accordance with these principles. And that is the Coho Special, shown here in some different variations. And though it looks very much like a clouser minnow on the surface, there are some non-standard materials and it's tied a bit differently than your usual clouser. So he does give a partial materials list, but unfortunately there isn't a step-by-step guide to tying the pattern. And these photographs are a little bit indistinct. Outside of the book I've found no other references to the pattern, so I'm just making my best guess at how to do it. So I'm going to give it a go now, and tomorrow we'll take it for a swim. Here's one I've just tied in fluorescent pink, pretty much according to the book, with a few changes that I'll point out as I go along. And the total length on this is about 2 3/4 inches, which is what I like for the resident coho that are coming along. Here's one in fluorescent chartreuse, tied in just the same way, but for now I'm going to tie the pink one. So the front hook is a Mustad 34007 in size 4. Stoll's recipe calls for size 2 or size 4. I'm going with the smaller hook primarily because I don't want the finished fly to be too heavy and sink too deep for the coho. I don't need to worry about the barb because obviously I'll be cutting off the point when I'm done. Excuse me while I just scooch my vise along a tad to get it centered in frame. That's better. So my thread's going to be UTC 140 denier in fluorescent pink. In the book illustrations it looks like plain nickel coloured eyes were used, but no size was given, so I'm going with 3/16 inch eyes. At the moment I don't have any plain ones, so I'm using these brass eyes from Montana Fly Company. They've got red irises with flecks of glitter in them. To find the ideal tie-in position, I like to place the eyes along the shank with one end at the tip of the eye, and then I'll start to wrap my thread where the other end of the dumbbell reaches to. So that's my marker for attaching the eyes. So I'll make several diagonal wraps in each direction, initially to secure the eyes. And then some helicopter wraps to tighten up. Now at this stage I'm not placing too many thread wraps between the eyes because I'm going to be tying in a bunch more material there later. So I've taken my thread back to the start of the bend and I'm going to add a little bit of clear fluorescing UV resin to the thread wraps, top and bottom. And just cure that. And the recipe calls for these red Gamakatsu octopus hooks in size 4 for the trailer hook, either looped or snelled to Amnesia monofilament. And I think a nice alternative would be to use the same model hook in a pink finish. And for the chartreuse version, I've just been using chartreuse octopus hooks. So as I mentioned, the trailer link is Amnesia in high visibility red. And the book doesn't specify what test to use, but I've got 25 pound. Same for the chartreuse pattern, but in high visibility green. Now 2 strands of 25 pound Amnesia won't go through the eye of a number 4 hook, so I'm snelling my hook with a single strand instead of attaching it with a loop. 1 1/4 inches in length. Now there happens to be a photo in another part of the book that shows a Coho Special under construction, and you can see that the mono is folded back on itself. Now obviously this is a great way to prevent it from pulling out, but for me it always creates a great big lump here, which makes it very difficult to tie in the belly material. So instead, what I like to do is take my lighter and I'll just soften the end of my mono till it just starts to melt. And I'm going to take a big heavy pair of pliers and crimp it. So that's going to make a flat end that's going to look like an old-fashioned spade hook, like that. So place that flattened end right up between the eyes. And then take a series of very tight touching turns going from the back to the front. Then reverse directions with your wraps. And then make a third layer going forward. So finally I'm going to coat that with my UV resin. And I really don't think that's going anywhere. The belly's made from this winging material, Deadly Dazzle. The recipe calls for either white or light purple. I found both colours online, and it's imported from South Africa by RD Fly Fishing, which is a division of Renzetti, and it's a blend of fine crinkly fibre with UV flash, not unlike Steve Farrar blend. I'm using the light purple here. So I've cut myself a long half pencil width hank, and I'm going to tie it in right behind those eyes. Fold the rest back and tie that down too. And I'll trim it so that the material extends just beyond the trailer hook. Now to make a lateral line, I've got some Krystal Flash in fluorescent pink, and if I was making the chartreuse version, obviously I'd go with a fluorescent chartreuse Krystal Flash. So I'm taking 3 strands of flash, and I'll cut those in half to make 6. And I'll fold those around the thread. Actually, I first need to take my thread up to the eye. Okay, now I'll tie those along, right along the top of the shank. Separate them around the hook for now. Move my thread behind the eyes and just take a few more turns. Get my thread back in front. Now the only change I'm going to make to the published pattern is to add a few strands of 1/69th inch lateral scale, just because I love this stuff. It's an opal, and I've just got 2 strands, and I'm going to tie it in just like I did for the Krystal Flash. And then get that to the back. Trim it to the length of the belly. So for the wing, Richard Stoll is very particular about using fluorescent pink bucktail, not just pink. I'm just going to clean out this bunch. going to measure it and then trim it to about the same length as the belly. And again, I forgot to position my thread in front of the eyes. There we go. So I'm going to tie this down using a pinch wrap, just as if I was tying in a clouser minnow. Now, if you look at photos in the book, they're not entirely clear, but to me it seems like the bucktail is tied down behind the eyes, unlike it would be in a clouser minnow, where it'd only be tied in front. So that's how I'm going to tie it. So having done that, I'm going to make a whole bunch of diagonal wraps from each side to cover up all that flash and bucktail. And of course that will all help to keep the eyes from moving around. See, all covered up. Now I'll just make myself a whip finish. And finally I'm going to seal that whole deal with a coat of my thin fluorescent Loon UV resin. Now for my saltwater flies I always put on an additional thin coat of Sally Hansen's. And when that's dry, I'll snip off the point of the front hook. And there we have the Coho Special. Sure looks to me like it should attract a salmon. We'll just have to wait and see. Well, it's August the 19th and I've come for morning's fishing at Point No Point. By this time in the year, you'd expect a lot of coho to be around. So I've been here a couple of times already and the fishing has been slow. I've caught plenty of shakers in the kind of 12-inch range, but only the last time I came here have I seen just a few larger coho come out, caught by gear anglers because they've been way out in the channel. But I'm expecting a lot to change anytime soon. Should certainly be an opportunity to catch a few fish. So we'll see how we go. The tide is actually dropping. There's about 4 hours until low tide. And most of the action I've seen has been right around low tide. So it's a lovely morning. Not much wind, which is good. So we'll see how we do. It's a keeper. Well, that's the Coho Special. After catching that coho, it's in one heck of a mess. It's lost an eye. I think I'll change that out for another one. been fishing about 3.5 hours now, and it's time to call it a day. I'm quite tired of throwing that 8-weight rod. In the morning I just had this single bite, just one bite, and that resulted in just that one fish. But I'm happy with it because it's my first take-home coho of the year. So with that, I will say farewell from Point No Point.